So we're going to talk about gold today. Today's July 15, and we are basically thinking that gold is going to continue to rally up into November 7th, into the election, and that it is probably going to have some trouble after that until next April, but a year from now should be higher than it is, should be the highest point that it reaches, which means November of 2025 should be a meaningful high in gold, and a target that we have for that is 2690. Now, this is mostly for swing traders and for longer term investors. We're not focusing in on the short term. For the people who are interested in day trading, we do have a matrix channel set up for the gold, which does have all the matrix channel lines, and the indicator has been very effective in terms of short term trading. But why do we think that gold's going to go up into November and fall into April and such? What's really interesting is we found a 270 trading day interval in gold that very often represents high and low points. And you can see the vertical lines in this chart indicate some of the important pivots that are generated by that. And astrologically, it's interesting, that particular interval of repetition represents the Sun and Saturn conjunction cycle. The Sun and Saturn are conjunct once a year, and then a little bit more than a year later, about 54 weeks later, they get conjunct again. Those points tend to be meaningful. And what we found is really interesting, that 3 cycles of 270 trading days, 3 cycles, turns out to be predictive of gold for the last year, except the swings are upside down, which is really unusual, and I think most of you don't realize that can actually happen. But this particular market has been following 809 trading days, which is about 3 times 270 trading days, upside down. And mathematically, there's some really cool things about that number. First of all, 809 trading days turns out to be half of 1,618 trading days, which is approximately 6 cycles of the Sun-Saturn conjunction cycle. And 1,618 is the number 1.618 times 1,000. And another point to show how the creativity of nature is that that same interval is also 161.8 weeks, 1,618 trading days, 161.8 weeks. Again, the number 1.618 times 100. Both of them show up, and they are happening right now. That interval is repeating. And if you can see, what happens next is the market works its way up into November and has a breakdown into next April, and then it goes up again higher into November. Now, to confirm this, we have further information that 5 cycles of this 270-day trading cycle is repeating right side up. And that one is exactly 261.8 weeks. So 161.8 weeks is repeating upside down, 261.8 weeks is repeating right side up. And that has a very similar pattern going forward, also calls for a rally up into November. It's very bullish, actually, if you look at that pattern, going all the way up into next November. We think that the dip between November and April will be fairly large, though. So that you may or may not. If you're a swing trader, you may choose to go short during that time. And if you're an investor, you may consider the possibility of stepping aside between the election and next April before you go long again. Our projected target for the next major resistance level, which is probably what will happen about a year from now in November, is $2,690 on gold. Okay? At that point, there could be a big break after the November 2025 high. So we have several things connecting. We have this Sun-Saturn synodic cycle, which is approximately 54 weeks or 270 trading days, and multiples of it, and 3 times it turns out to be repeating absolutely upside down, and 5 times it tends to be repeating right side up. And we also see that there's a relationship between the golden ratio and both the daily number of trading days and the weekly number of trading days, and the relationship between the 3 multiple of the 3 times 270 and 5 times 270 is a 1.618 ratio. All the golden ratio numbers are popping up, and they're all connected to the market, and it basically says the market's still bullish, but after the election it may have some trouble, and it doesn't have a strong future until April of next year, when it will resume, probably make a significant run between April and November, and then we're done. Now, I also wanted to point out, we're still talking about the S&P, and the basic story with the S&P is it has been eating alive all the short-term dips, and it's rallying, and it probably will follow our next path up to the next high, which we're assuming is around August 13th, followed by a potential breakdown into September 12th. We haven't changed that. And there's also a small chance, and not such a small chance, that we'll see some trouble still, because there are several indications there's a low between the 25th and the 29th of July. So the market still could come down for a week or so and have some sort of a correction before it goes up into a final high in mid-August. Okay. Now, coming back to the something that everybody knows about, which I didn't even know if I wanted to talk about, but I think it's valuable. So this Saturday, there was obviously an event that was, kind of world, everybody knows, which everybody is responding to and feels terrible about. And that is an event where, you don't want to see any political candidate have a bullet shot at them. But what's interesting is, because I follow the astrology, it turns out that this is part of a cycle, and that cycle has a 130-year interval. And without going into too much detail, the 1/3 points of any cycle tend to have a similar tendency to the whole cycle. So if the whole thing is a low to low, then the 1/3 points would be low to low to low, like that. So if you go back 43 1/3 years, which is 1/3 of that cycle, it comes out in March of 1981. And guess what? That was when another president of the United States was actually shot at. Ronald Reagan was also shot at that time. And it was also another bad thing for the United States. And 2 times ago, if you go to it came out in 1938, in the early part of 1938, and at that time there was a coup that was attempting to assassinate Hitler. And if you go back 3 times ago, which was the full cycle, the full similarness, it was in June of 1894, 130 years ago, then the president of France was actually assassinated. Okay. Now, the interesting thing is, many people are worried that somehow this is connected to what happened in 1968, where several important world leaders were assassinated, 1963, when President Kennedy was assassinated. Those are not this cycle. That will not continue. The next time this thing is going to happen is another 43 years from now, so you don't have to worry about history repeating in a negative way. For those who are interested in the astrology, I don't know that I want to go deeply into it, but it has to do with the position of Jupiter and the south node being roughly 120 degrees apart, and the moon running into the south node. Same thing happened in 1981. Very similar thing happened in 1938, and the exact same thing happened in 1894. Okay, so this is just explaining something that most of the astrologers didn't see this. They see another thing, that there's apparently the Mars-Uranus conjunction happened on the 15th today, and many people think that would be responsible, and maybe it has an influence. But this other thing repeatedly has a reliable effect of having some sort of political candidate or president attacked. Okay, so I wanted to add that just for clarity, and also to remove fear that we don't have to worry that the world is coming to an end and there's going to be a whole bunch of assassinations, and that we're in the same rhythm that we were in the 1960s.